I would like to talk briefly about passing the test. Okay. Passing the test. All of you have attended school. And you know that motion is movement. And that promotion is onward or upward movement. Demotion is to move away from or down from. You know, if you don't pass the test, you are not promoted. And the adversary states that if you're not promoted, you just remain at the same class level. But if motion is movement, then whatever the motion is, if you're not being promoted, you are being demoted. Because we know that there's always movement. Then, considering the predicament of our people today, we know that we as a people have not passed the test. Because we are being continuously demoted. And if you do not pass the test, either you are not being taught right, or you are not studying the material that you are being taught. Our people are not passing the test. They are not being taught right, or they are not studying. Promotion. In the beginning, in the book of Genesis, there was an oral test. In the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, verse 8. Read, please.
And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden.
The tree of life in the midst of the garden.
And the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
And also in the garden was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The same chapter, verses 16 and 17. Read, please.
And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And God said unto the man which he had created, of all of the trees of the garden thou mayest freely eat,
But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil,
But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil,
thou shalt not eat of it.
thou shalt not eat of it.
For in the day that thou eatest thereof,
For in the day that thou eatest thereof,
thou shalt surely die.
that day, the day that thou eatest therefrom, thou shalt surely die. That was a lesson. Of all the trees of the garden thou mayest freely eat, except the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then God allowed the serpent to test Eve and Adam to see if they would pass the test. An oral test was given so that you understand the significance of and the necessity of listening, so that when you are asked, you never know at what hour you may be being tested. And someone approached Eve and asked a question, gave her a test. The 3rd chapter, starting at verse 1. Read.
Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?
Question. The test. First of all, he was a coward. And he has been a coward ever since Genesis. He has always attempted to use the woman to get to the man. He was afraid of Adam. Remember the reproach of Genesis. Do not allow the adversary to use you again. Remember how this fall began. The failing of a great oral test. She should have sent him to Adam.
That's right. He received instructions.
The instructions were not given to her. And God said unto the man, but I am certain that he had taught Eve. But had she have been listening, she wouldn't have failed the test. But there's another sisterhood that has been raised up. You must not fail the test. You must lift up your man. For only if there is a king can there be a queen. Only if there is a prince. You remember how in the little story books, when you used to read them and you always wanted to be a princess. But you didn't know that a princess was a derivative of a prince. You didn't know that in order for you to be a princess, you had to find you a prince. A princess is the royal partner of a prince. So then we find the adversary coming unto the sister. And he asked her a question. Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? He merely wanted to hear her response. If she had have given the right answer, the discussion would have ended. But whenever you ask and you give the wrong answer, you're inviting trouble to yourself. Ever since Genesis, whenever you give the right answer, you resist evil. But if you give the wrong answer, evil clings unto you. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And if you do not resist the devil, he will cleave unto you. Why is he holding fast to our people today? Because they have not resisted the devil. Why haven't they resisted the devil? Because the devil is disguised as an angel of light. He has hidden himself in intelligence. And he appears to be something desired. He cut off his horns.
Just to recognize it.
He removed his tail. He he disguised himself, mind you, as an angel of light. Light is intellect of God. He disguised himself somewhere, somehow in the intellect of God. I say he disguised himself in religion. Light, prophetically, is the intellect of God. And he disguised himself in apostate religion. So he asked the question. Continue on.
And the woman said unto the serpent.
And the woman responded, and she said unto the serpent,
we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden.
Listen carefully now. We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden.
But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden.
But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden.
God hath said.
Ye
shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die.
She hadn't been listening, had she? What tree was in the midst of the garden? The tree of life was in the midst of the garden. You see, she hadn't been listening. She failed the test. And we've been tumbling down ever since.